If you want a Jeep, a pickup truck, and a convertible, there's really only one choice, the Jeep Gladiator. It's been on sale for a couple of years now, but for 2024, it sees a significant refresh. There's a lot more safety technology included, there's a new infotainment screen, and styling tweaks inside and out. This specific model here, as you can see, is the Mojave, or if you want to sound fancy, the Mojave. Anyway, the Mojave X includes some standard new features like the steel bumpers, the off-road camera, and a full-time transfer case. Those not familiar with Jeep's naming conventions may wonder what exactly is a Mojave. Well, it sits one rung below the Rubicon. The Rubicon's sort of the real off-roader meant to go on trails and rock climbing. But if you look at the Gladiator, it's not really going to be the first choice for most off-roaders. The wheelbase is so long and there's a big overhang on the pickup truck bed that breakover angles and departure angles both wouldn't be optimal. A real off-roader's probably getting a Wrangler. So the Mojave actually probably makes more sense because this is inspired by the desert it's named after, and it's meant to be a high-speed desert runner. So it's meant to go fast over very loose and unpredictable surfaces. Now, there isn't deserts where I live, and there's not deserts in a lot of North America. But I think the same principles would apply to pothole-strewn, unmaintained, dirt, muddy roads. So what makes the Gladiator Mojave? Well, a lot of off-road upgrades. There is a command track part-time transfer case with a 2.72 to 1 four-wheel drive low system. Up front, there are what is called a Fox front hydro juice bumper, and then there's also Fox 2.5-inch internal bypass shocks with reservoirs. In the front, they're just lined up right with the wheel, and then if you go to the back, they're just in front of the rear wheels. Of course, the vehicle itself sits 1 inch higher on a 1 inch higher lift kit. There's a True-Lock rear axle locker. There's Dana 44 heavy-duty solid front and rear axles with a 4.1 axle ratio. This particular model, we have the 17-inch optional alloy wheels with the upgraded Falcon mud tires that are quite aggressive and look pretty badass. There's other little changes stylistically too. You have the orange outlining the Mojave name, and on the Desert Rated badge and the Jeep badge, and the tow hooks up front are also that orange. And there's a hood scoop reminiscent sort of the 392 Wrangler. Of course, part of the appeal, or maybe the big appeal of getting the Rubicon, is it has a pickup bed. In here you can currently see it's a little dirty because I use it for a dump run. And that's the beauty of something like this. You can just throw stuff in the bed and you don't care how dirty it is, you can just hose it out later. Of course, being a Jeep, it can be a convertible. So the doors here, they can come off. Inside, you have the 2 front panels, which are almost like a T-top. They pop out separately, and there's a bag in the bed that they go in. And the whole rear roof section can come off, but that's a little bit more involved. This Jeep, though, it's far too clean. Let's go take it off-road and see how it handles its natural habitat. Before we get to the Gladiator Mojave's forte off-roading, let's talk a little bit about its on-road driving, because a lot of these will spend a lot of time on pavement. Around the city, the engine produces decent power and low-end torque, which is good because you also need that when you're hitting the mud and trails. But when you're on a highway like this, the near 5,000-pound weight is just a little too much for the 285 horsepower V6 to handle. It's not like it's overly slow, it's just you have to really work the engine and transmission to maintain freeway speeds. And that's sort of a theme with the whole vehicle. The brakes take a little more effort to slow it down. Being a Wrangler-based vehicle, it's not exactly got the best road manners. It doesn't want to overly track straight, so you're constantly making little corrections on the wheel, which has a pretty hefty steering ratio, again, for off-roading. Wrangler and Gladiator owners will disagree with me and say, oh, the road manners are just fine. Which is true, they're just fine. They're not good, and they're definitely not great. Compared to nearly everything else on the road, short of maybe a Grenadier, it takes a little more effort to drive this vehicle in a straight line. With the large steering ratio and the soft, squishy off-road bias tires, you're constantly making little steering corrections. And if it's a gusty day, the big, flat-sided, long Gladiator is really susceptible to crosswinds, which again require a little steering. It's not like it's really hard to drive or anything. It's just a little more effort, similar to how I explained with the accelerator and the brake. But that's the sort of compromise you're going to get on something that's this capable off-road. As far as comfort goes, most roads, the suspension's fine. On more broken pavement, it'll get a little jittery, and that's just a side effect of solid axles. The front seats I find comfortable. Some passengers have said it's a little too plain or industrial inside, but again, this is a Jeep inside. This is not your Grand Cherokee. This is a meant to go on the trails Jeep that you don't mind if you get a little scuffed up or dirty. Rear seat, same thing. I'd fully fit. Most adults will fit back there. Is it the poshest of accommodations? No, but it's not meant to be. And speaking of comfort, getting in and out of the Gladiator X Mojave is downright comical for anyone under 5 feet tall. With no running boards and a giant step in, they kind of have to crawl rather than just kind of gracefully get in. I mean, I'm 6 feet tall and it's still a bit of a jump in and out, especially if the sills and doors are all coated in mud or grime. Of course, there's extra road noise from the big, wide, chunky tires, and there's always a little more wind noise because these roof panels aren't exactly the most soundproof. Now, having said all that, I'm not trying to make it sound like a Gladiator is unlivable. It's not at all. I've done so many different things in this. I loaded up the bed with a bunch of old paint cans and garbage and took it to the dump, which was great because you don't have to worry about getting the inside of a car dirty. Yesterday, I was in a full suit and drove across one of the busiest cities in North America without any issues and was fine. I've taken my family places. It is very capable of doing a lot of different things. Just be prepared for some of the minor trade-offs for the major gains when you're driving down a dirt trail. There's one more factor too, which I haven't really discussed, which honestly makes me forgive any sort of perceived shortcoming the Gladiator has, and that's the coolness factor. Especially in the Mojave X trim with the optional off-road tires, it just looks cool. It looks like you're driving this big sort of Tonka pickup truck. I had so many people that I know smile when I drove up in it or wave. You have this big Wrangler style hood with the scoop and where you'd fold the windshield down if you're so inclined to. It's just one of those vehicles that isn't necessarily a rational choice, but it's definitely a cool choice. And speaking of cool, this can still be had with a 6-speed manual transmission. I have the 8-speed automatic, which actually improves my fuel economy a bit, but it's just awesome that you could get this big off-road capable pickup truck with the 6-speed manual. They're becoming rarer and rarer, so if that's your thing, get one before they disappear for good. But I also get that a lot of things that may be perceived I'm complaining about are enduring quirks that Jeep owners love. I mean, there's that whole saying, it's a Jeep thing you wouldn't understand, and that's true. I mean, I understand it's not necessarily my thing, but I definitely get the appeal of this. And in short doses, I love driving it. Trying to maintain the vehicle at about 70 miles an hour, which is well within the legal limits of a lot of states and provinces, does require the engine and transmission to work a little harder than most vehicles. You're constantly having to give extra little bits of throttle here and there, which will make the engine rev up and maybe kick down a gear or two to get back to where you were and maintain that speed. And then maybe the vehicle slows down a bit and you got to give it that gas again. It kicks down a gear and gets back up to that speed. Again, it's not a huge hassle, overly annoying. It's just one more thing that requires more work. The nice thing is the 24 Gladiator has adaptive cruise control. So if you're doing a long freeway jaunt, you can just let the vehicle do it for you. So what about open air motoring? Well, I've taken the front 2 panels off only because, like I said earlier, there's a handy little bag in the bed that I can store them in. Although the doors and the rear half of the roof do come off, it's a lot more effort and hassle, and you can't bring them with you. So you can only do a round trip when taking those off to get back to get the pieces. With the front, you can drive wherever you want because you have them in the bed. So how about wind buffeting? Well, I'm going about 40 miles an hour right now, and as you can hear me fine. And the wind, although I can hear buffeting above my head a bit, isn't bothering my ears, nor is it blowing too hard in my face. I've been up to speeds of about 60 miles an hour, and it's the same thing. So this is more like a giant sunroof, really, than a convertible. So Jeep's done a good job of engineering this whole system. And now that I have those panels off and I can see a little clearer up here, there's a lot of mud up here. It looks like someone enjoyed this off-road before I did, but that's where I'm heading now to go play in the mud. As I mentioned, we're here at the off-road area. It's not exactly a hardcore road. It's not a big trail with rocks and stuff. It's just an unmaintained, muddy road that will get worse as I go down. So let's see how the Gladiator does. So off we go. To start, let's take it nice and easy in automatic 4-wheel drive. If things get a little sketchier down the road, I'll switch it up to maybe more of a low range or maybe even the off-road plus mode. But right now, nothing here is really challenging the Gladiator at all. It's just muddy ruts and muddy ruts. I can avoid most of them if I just move myself side to side. The thing is, seeing ahead what I'm going through and feeling it in here is such a completely different sensation, because the suspension is just so good and I have so much ground clearance. It's not even like a worry as to what this road is. It's starting to narrow a bit here, but once again, it's just a bumpy little road that I'm not too concerned about. It's dried out actually up here, so it's just going over ruts, and I mean, I could go much faster, but first time on the road, I don't want to push my luck. I could see though in the rainy season how this road could be quite a handful. Things have gotten a little more ruddy, a little more muddy, but I'm still just in four-wheel auto. I've either highly overestimated this road or underestimated the Jeep, or maybe a little bit of both. But yeah, if you got to drive some road like this with a bed full of stuff, this is your vehicle. The Jeep Gladiator continues to excel off-road, which is no surprise. I mean, that's what it's primarily designed to do. But with the 2024 updates, it's gotten a little better, and the X on the Mojave adds some more off-road ready bits. So overall, it is a better package, and I do like the new infotainment system. So that raises the question, is this a one-trick off-road pony? Well, that really depends on your perspective, because it can pretty much do anything, just sometimes with a few compromises. One thing you can't argue though is how cool this truck is. And if you're someone that regularly drives unmaintained roads and needs an open bed, this might be the right vehicle for you.